Erev Tov, everyone. Erev Tov. It is Monday night. It is 8 p.m. here on the east side of the United States, here in the diaspora. This is the Maimon Beit Knesset, therefore it must be Zeyde Story Corner. That's right, Zeyde Story Corner. So we're going to continue on with these stories of Isaac Basheva. Isaac Basheva, singer. It's a good thing it's written. Yeah, it's a good thing it's written down. So, Isaac Basheva's singer, his wonderful stories we've been reading, and we're going to continue on where we left off last week. Zla. Yeah, that's right, Zla. Zla the witch, and Koza, the king, or Koz, whatever, the king, and do you remember any of it? Yeah, well, yeah, I do. I do remember some of it. Some of the names are kind of escaping me at the moment, but we'll get there. Okay, so let us see who we have in the chat room. Yeah, Lisa, you can read that. Yeah, okay, so we have Veronica. Shochi is with us, Richard and Marshall, and others watching in the background, and just catching up with what it says in the chat room. So hopefully the internet will stay up. Yeah, and hopefully that the internet will stay up for us. We had some real issues with it over Shabbat. It's like Friday. It was, well, actually it started on Thursday. It was up and down, and then Friday it was even worse. We had long periods of time where it was out and then would come back up for a few minutes, and then it went out again, about the time that we lit Shabbat candles and everything, actually even before that, and sometime during Shabbat it came back on, and it seems to have been on ever since. So hopefully it's going to stay that way, and we won't have any more issues with it. So anyway, we should probably get on with the story, shouldn't we? Yeah, we want to finish this. Yeah, it's been a pretty good one. So let us get you on your camera here. And there I am. Okay, so if you remember the last week that we had the story of Tzla, the witch, and Yosef, or Joseph, as it is written in the story, that he's tried to convince the villagers that it was not necessary to sacrifice their beautiful young women to the river in order to satisfy some kind of a demon, and he convinced them not to do it, and so on and so forth. So we're going to back up just a little bit, just to remind everybody where we were at, and then we will finish the story. Okay, so let's go on with Tzla. Okay, Tzla continued to shower her curses on Yosef. She foretold that on the last day of Serpin, which was their month, the sun would be extinguished. I think that was August, wasn't it? Yeah, I think it actually was sometime in August, how we reckon time. So anyway, the sun would be extinguished. The moon would fall out of the sky. The trees would wither, and everything alive would perish. The waters of the Vistula, which is what they were going to sacrifice the women to, the Vistula River, would turn yellow and hot as boiling sulfur and cover the entire earth, if you can believe such a thing. Anyway, the last day of Serpien was the most beautiful of all. Not a single cloud marred the blue sky. The birds sang endlessly. The air was sweet as honey. Yet, until night fell, Zla was sure the flood would come. When the golden sun set behind the Vistula, she tore her hair, wailed, screamed, and whirled about in a frenzy. But the world did not come to an end. Throughout Mazovia, the news spread of Yosef's victory of his coming marriage to Koza. Zla was so humiliated that she hid in a deep cave. Well, now that Yosef had been proven right, his freedom was restored. And Wilk, that was the king, Wilk. Yeah, that's right, Wilk was the king. Wilk was prepared to give him his daughter in marriage. But there were many obstacles. Some of the older courtiers and their wives remained on the side of Zla, and the witch would send word from her cave that Joseph was a warlock who would bring a curse on the land. In addition, Joseph followed strange customs that the people of Mazovia could not understand. He refused to eat pork. When he prayed, he wrapped himself in a shawl striped black and white and trimmed with fringes, and turned his face toward the east. At the entrance to his hut, he had fashioned a piece of parchment he called a mezuzah. On the Sabbath, he neither kindled a fire nor did his goldsmith's work. He also refused to bow before the idols of Mazovia. He did not like to hunt. Chieftain Wilk soon came to realize that if Joseph remained among them, there would be a rebellion in Mazovia. Now we pick up the story where we left off. Wilk now tried to persuade his daughter that the stranger was not the right husband for her. But Koza, who had always obeyed her father, suddenly became stubborn. She fell at his feet and said, "I will never love anyone but Joseph. If I cannot be his wife, I will throw myself into the Vistula, and the river will have its sacrifice." "But Joseph cannot remain in Mazovia," Wilk said. "Because of him, the people are divided. If he stays, all will suffer." "Then I will go with him to Jerusalem," said Koza. Wilk called his counselors together to seek their advice. Most of them were of the opinion that the young woman's love must be respected. Others argued that it would be an insult to the chieftain's honor if he gave his daughter in marriage to a stranger who refused to worship the gods of Mazovia. Zla, who did not give up easily, sent a message to the council room announcing that the stars were against the match. However, faith in the stars and Zla's prophecies was no longer strong. The men whose daughters had been sacrificed to the Vistula now accused Zla of being a murderess who had sent to their deaths the most beautiful girls of Mazovia. When Zla learned that Wilk had agreed to the marriage of Joseph and Koza, despite her threats and warnings, she decided to make one final effort to interfere. There were magic powers that could be used only once. If she failed, her power would be destroyed forever. First, she fasted 3 days and 3 nights. Then, she lit 7 candles made of human fat. When this was done, she shaved off her elf locks and clipped her long claw-like nails, kneaded them into a lump of dough, and burned it before an image of Baba Yaga, all the while invoking the evil powers. On the 4th night, she made her way to a thick forest, and using the most potent incantations and spells, she summoned Baba Yaga and her retinue of devils. The night was hot and dark. Suddenly, a wind rose and a scarlet light appeared. Baba Yaga arrived in her mortar, carrying her pestle in one hand and her tree broom in the other. Her face was like peach, but her nose was red, turned up, with broad flaring nostrils. Her eyes burned like live coals. Instead of hair, thistles grew out of her skull. And though she was a woman, she had a beard like a man. Her companions rode on brooms, canes, and shovels. Even Topiel, king of the Vistula, came, foaming with rage. The beasts of the forest, frightened by these apparitions, howled and screeched and hid themselves in ditches and hollow trees. Zla bowed 7 times to Baba Yaga. Mighty Baba, as you already know, a man comes from a faraway city of Jerusalem, and his name is Joseph. With cunning words he has conquered the heart of chieftain Wilk and won the love of Koza. Because of him, there was no sacrifice to the Vistula this year. Now he is about to marry Koza. If their marriage takes place, it will mean that we who worship you have lost our right to rule over human fate. I implore you, therefore, do not let this wedding take place. There will be no wedding, Baba Yaga cried, in a voice as hoarse as a saw. I'll sweep it away with my broom and crush it with my pestle. There will be no wedding, Topiel roared. I will drown it with my waters. There will be no wedding, chorused all the goblins, hobgoblins, spirits, and imps, each in his own shrill voice. That night, Zla went to bed, assured that the evil spirits would emerge victorious after all. it might have been impossible for them to destroy the crops and bring the flood, but surely they could stop a marriage. But Zlah did not know that Joseph possessed the secret powers of a soothsayer and could see that what was happening long distances away. He knew Zlah had summoned the evil forces. He also knew how to overcome them. He prayed to God, and his prayers were heard. On the day of the wedding, Baba Yaga, Topiel, and all the evil creatures were suddenly overcome by a deep sleep. Zlah tried desperately to summon them, but they did not wake up. Since the wedding ceremony could not be performed in the temple of the idols, it took place in the palace garden. Koza's parents and her ladies in waiting were the only guests. Joseph placed a golden ring on her finger and intoned the words of the marriage vow himself. The following day, Joseph and Koza mounted 2 magnificent stallions given to them by Wilk and started on their long journey to the Holy Land. Although the gift of the horses was a very generous one, it did not compare with the crown Joseph had made for Wilk. Remember, it had a wolf engraved on it, because Wilk means wolf. Okay. It was very difficult for Wilk and Wilkova to part with their only daughter. Koza too suffered at leaving her parents. But so it has always been. A wife must go with her husband, especially one who saves her life. A huge throng accompanied them to the very edge of Mazovia. Trumpets were blown, drums and bells played. At night, torches were lit. If one left one's country in those days, there was no way to send messages back. One was never heard from again. But somehow the Mazovians learned that Joseph and Koza were living happily in Jerusalem. Joseph's fame as a goldsmith spread far and wide. Koza bore him sons and daughters who were brought up in the faith that there is only one God. In Mazovia, from that time on, human sacrifices were forbidden. And later, when Mazovia and the surrounding tribal lands were united into one kingdom called Poland, the Poles became Christians. Human sacrifice was then abolished throughout the country. Zlah had long since died. Baba Yaga, Topiel, and all their evil bands were heard about mainly in stories that grandmothers told their grandchildren as they churned the butter or wove the flax. But for many centuries, it was the custom on the first day of summer for the girls of Mazovia to assemble on the shores of the Vistula. They would throw a straw dummy into the river in memory of the maiden's sacrifice to Topiel. While the straw girl was bobbing up and down in the current, drifting toward the open sea, they would sing, dance, and celebrate Joseph's rescue of the beautiful Koza. And there you have the end of the story. Isn't that a wonderful story? I like that story. Okay. Just check the back the chat room, see what is going on. Okay. This is it's kind of a short story, but it's a kind of nice one. It is called A Hanukkah Evening in My Parents' House. All year round, my father... These would have been good if we had done these a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, I probably would have been a lot more... There's a lot of stories about Hanukkah in here. Yes, there is. Actually, a lot of stories about Hanukkah in there. It's a good stories, too. Yes, they are good stories. Well, we should go on. Yes, we probably should go on. People are waiting to hear. Okay, so we go on. A Hanukkah evening in my parents' house. All year round, my father, a rabbi in Warsaw, did not allow his children to play any games. Even when I wanted to play cat's cradle with my youngest brother, Moshe, Father would say, "Why lose time on such nonsense? Better to recite psalms." Often, when I got 2 pennies from my father, and I told him I wanted to buy a chocolate ice cream or colored pencils, he would say, "You would do a lot better to find a poor man and give your pennies to him, because charity is a great deed." But on Hanukkah, after Father lit the Hanukkah candles, he allowed us to play dreidel for half an hour. I remember one such night, especially. It was the 8th night, and in our Hanukkah lamp, 8 wicks were burning. Outside, a heavy snow had fallen. Even though our stove was hot, frost trees were forming on the window panes. My brother Joshua, who was 11 years older than I, already a grown-up, was saying to my sister Hildele, "Do you see the snow? Each flake is a hexagon. It has 6 sides, with fancy little designs and decorations. Every one a perfect jewel, and slightly different from all the others." My brother Joshua read scientific books. He also painted landscapes, peasants' huts, fields, forests, animals, sometimes a sunset. He was tall and blond. Father wanted him to become a rabbi, but Joshua's ambition was to be an artist. My sister Hildele was even older than Joshua and already engaged to be married. She had dark hair and blue eyes. The idea that Hildele was going to be the wife of some strange young man and even going to change her surname seemed to me so peculiar that I refused to think about it. When Father heard what Joshua had said about the snow, he promptly said, "It's all the work of the Almighty, who bestows beauty on everything He creates." Why must each flake of snow be so beautiful since people step on it and it turns to water? Hilde asked. Everything comes easy to nature, Joshua answered. The crystals arrange themselves in certain patterns. Take the frost trees. Every winter they are the same. They actually look like fig leaves and date trees. Such trees don't grow here in Poland, but in the Holy Land, Father added. When the Messiah comes, all God-fearing people will return to the land of Israel. There will be a resurrection of the dead. The Holy Temple will be rebuilt. The world will be full of wisdom as the sea of water. The door opened and Mother came in from the kitchen. She was frying the Hanukkah pancakes. Her lean face was flushed. For a while she stood there and listened. Although Mother was the daughter of a rabbi herself, she always pleaded with Father to be lenient and not to preach to us all the time as she felt he did. I heard her say, "Let the children have some fun. Who is winning?" "It's little Moshe's lucky night," Hilde said. "He's cleaning us out, the darling." "Don't forget to give a few pennies to the poor," Father said to him. In olden times, one had to give a tithe to the priest, but now the tithe should be given to the needy. As it should be. Yes, okay. Mother nodded and smiled, and returned to the kitchen, and we continued our game. The tin dreidel which I bought for Hanukkah had 4 Hebrew letters engraved on its sides: Nun, Gimel, He, and Shin. According to Father, these letters were the initials of words which meant a great miracle happened there. Nes Gadol Hayasham, right? Okay. An allusion to the war between the Maccabees and the Greeks in 170. The victory of the Maccabees is for this victory and the purification of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem from idols that Hanukkah is celebrated. But for our children, Gimel meant winning. Nun, losing. Hey, half winnings. Shin, another chance for the player. Moshe and I took the game seriously, but Joshua and Hilde played only to keep us company. They always let us, the younger ones, win. As for me, I was interested both in the game and in the conversation of the adults. As if he read my mind, I heard Joshua ask, why did God work miracles in ancient times, and why doesn't he work miracles in our times? It's a good question, huh? Yeah. Father pulled at his red beard. His eyes expressed indignation. What are you saying, my son? God works miracles in all generations, even though we are not always aware of them. Hanukkah, especially, is a feast of miracles. My grandmother Hilde, you, my daughter, are named after her, told me the following story. And we're going to pause here, and we're going to take our break, and then we'll come back and we'll find out what the story the rabbi has to say. What do you think, huh? Okay. So, we are going to take our break, and we shall be back in 6.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. The show starts in 3 minutes. The show starts in 2 minutes. The show starts in 1 minute. And now, on with the show.
And we are back. Just as we promised you, we are returned. Okay, let us find out what the story is the rabbi has to say. Okay. I have to find my place. Okay. In the village of Tishowitz, there was a child named Zadok. He was a progeny. When he was 3 years old, he could already read the Torah. At 5, he studied Talmud. He was very good-hearted both to human beings and animals. There was a mouse where his family lived, and every day little Zadok used to put a piece of cheese at the hole in the wall where the creature was hiding. At night, he put a saucer of milk there. One day, it happened to be the 3rd day of Hanukkah. Little Zadok overheard a neighbor tell of a sick tailor in the village who was so poor that he could not afford to buy wood to heat his hut. Little Zadok had heard that in the forest near the village there were a lot of fallen branches to be picked up for nothing, and he decided to gather as much wood as he could carry and bring it to the sick man. Oh, how nice of him. The child was so eager to help that he immediately set out for the forest without telling his mother where he was going. It was already late in the day when he left the house, and by the time he reached the forest, it was dark. Little Zadok had lost his way, and he would surely have died from the cold when, suddenly, he saw in the darkness 3 Hanukkah lights. For a while they lingered before his eyes, and then they began to move slowly. Little Zadok went after them, and they brought him back to the village, to the hut where the sick man lived with his family. When the lights reached the door of the sick man's hut, they fell, turning into gold coins. The sick man was able to buy bread for his family and himself, fuel to heat the oven, as well as oil for the Hanukkah lights. It wasn't long before he got well, and he was able to earn a living. Daddy, what happened to Zadok when he grew up? I asked. He became a famous rabbi, Father said. He was known as the saintly Rabbi Zadok. I became so quiet that I could hear the sputtering of the Hanukkah candles and the chirping of our house cricket. Mother came in from the kitchen with 2 full plates of pancakes. They smelled delicious. "Why is it so quiet? Is the game over?" she asked. My brother Moshe, who had seemed to be half asleep when father told his story, suddenly opened his big blue eyes wide and said, "Daddy, I want to give the money I won to a sick tailor." "You were preaching to them again, huh?" Mother asked, half reproachfully. "I didn't preach. I told them a story," Father said. "I want them to know that what God could do for 2,000 years, He can do also in our time." And there you have it. Cute little story, huh? Okay. This is a cute story, too. This is kind of very cute. This one is called Tzitzur and Beziza. In a dark space between the stove and the wall, where the highest wife stored her brooms, mops, and baking petals, there lived an orphan imp called Beziza. She had only one friend in the world, Tzitzur, the cricket. He too made a home behind the stove in a crevice between 2 bricks. An imp doesn't have to eat at all, but how Tzitzur imagined to survive is a riddle. Perhaps just the smell of fresh baked bread baking, a speck of flour that a house breeze swept back there, a drop of moisture in the air were enough for him. In any case, Tzitzur never complained to Beziza about the lack of food. He dozed all day long. When evening came, he was wide awake and began chirping stories that often continued through the night. Beziza had never known her father, Lantuk, the imp. Her mother, Pastida, who came from a wealthy family, had fallen in love with Lantuk. She had often told Beziza about the world that existed beyond the stove and about their relatives, the devils, gnomes, and hobgoblins, each with his own tricks and deviltries. Even so, if one has spent one's entire life behind the stove, one knows little of what's going on in the world, and Beziza had a strong curiosity, a trait, no doubt, inherited from her parents. While Tzitzur chirped out his endless tales, Beziza dreamed of impish adventure. Sometimes Beziza would ask Tzitzur to tell her how it was outside, and he would reply, "My mother said there's only trouble. Cold winds blow, cruel creatures devour one another." Nevertheless, Beziza would say thoughtfully, "I'd like to have a look myself at what the devils out there are doing." And that is exactly what fate had in mind. One day there was a loud pounding and hammering. The stove shook, bricks fell. Paziza flew up and down in fright. The homeowners had decided to rebuild the stove. The racket continued all day long, and both creatures huddled together until evening. When a piece of wall fell away, Tirso cried, "If we don't get out of here, we'll be killed." There was a break which reached to the outside. They crept through it and found themselves in the backyard of the house. They stood on the grass among shrubs and trees. It was the first time Paziza and Tirso had breathed fresh air. How beautiful the outside was! A huge sky, a moon, stars. Dew was forming. There was the whirling of myriads of crickets. They sounded just like Tzirtzur. "I will dig myself a hole," Tzirtzur said, "because when the sun rises, I must not stay in the open." "My mother, too, warned me against the sun," Paziza agreed. "But a hole in the earth is not a proper hiding place for me. There is a hollow in that tree. I will spend the day there." "The most important thing is that we don't lose each other," Tzirtzur declared. "I dig myself hole near the roots of your tree." Tzirtzur immediately began digging. He spoke to Paziza as he worked. "As long as it is summer, the outdoors is not so dangerous, but winter is a bitter time for crickets. It gets cold and something called snow covers the ground. Few crickets survive such weather." "Do you mind if I take a look around while you are busy?" Paziza asked. "You may get lost." "I won't fly far. I'll recognize this tree. It is taller than the others." Tzirtzur urged Paziza not to wander away. But curious Paziza was not yet ready to settle down in her hollow. Her desire to see all the new things around her was just too strong. She flew off and came to rest on a roof. "I never knew I could fly so well," she thought. Suddenly she heard someone calling to her. She looked in the direction of the voice and saw an imp perched on the weather vane. Although the only other imp Paziza had ever seen was her mother, she knew at once that this imp was a young man. He had 2 pairs of wings, and his horns were transparent. "What is your name?" he asked. Paziza was so surprised for a moment she remained speechless. Then she said, "Paziza." "Paziza? My name is Paziz." "Is that true, or are you joking?" "Why should I joke? That is my name. Maybe we're related. Let's fly." Paziza jumped down from the weather vane and somersaulted over the roof to Paziza. He took off, and she flew after him, amazed that she was not afraid. The night was full of shadowy creatures, imps, shades, goblins. One danced on the chimney, another slid down a drain pipe, a third whirled around using the weather vane as a carousel, a fourth clambered up a lamppost. Paziz flew so quickly that it made Paziza dizzy, but she managed to keep up with him. They passed over fields, forests, rivers, lakes, hamlets, and towns. As they flew along, Paziz entertained Paziza with stories of ruined castles, broken windmills, and forsaken houses. How large the world was! How strange the night! How endless the roads! Paziza could have flown on forever, but she knew that when the cock crows and the sun rises, an imp must hide. She also missed Zitzor. "Where are we?" she asked. "I hope I will recognize my tree." "There's no lack of trees here," Paziz remarked. "Yes, but my friend Zitzor, the cricket, is waiting for me." "What kind of a friendship is that, an imp and a cricket?" "We've always been together. I could never live without him," Paziza replied. "Very well, then. I will bring you back to where we started from." As they had been flying swiftly, but homeward bound, they traveled even more quickly than before. In her dreams, Paziza had never imagined an imp as clever and brave as Paziz was. He had not spent his life as she had in a dark space between a stove and a wall. Each day he found a different resting place. At night he wandered wherever he pleased. He made many friends. At last, the roof where Paziz and Paziza had met came into view, and Paziza recognized her tree nearby. To her amazement, when they landed, she saw that Zirzur was not alone. There was another cricket with him. Zirzur, too, had found a friend, and the new cricket was helping him dig a home. "Where have you been?" Zirzur called when he saw Paziza. "I was afraid you were lost." "I never would have found my way back had it not been for Paziz," she replied, and introduced the imp to Zirzur. Zirzur creaked politely. "As you see, I too have found a friend. Her name is Grilida." Fate always has surprises up its sleeves. When Paziza and Zirzur were forced to leave their home behind the stove, they were sure their end was near. But the powers that be had their own plans. Instead of misfortune, Paziza found Paziz, and Zirzur Grililda. The couple soon became so attached to each other that they were inseparable, and before long were married according to the customs of imps and crickets. As long as summer lasted, they all enjoyed the outdoors. Paziz and Paziza spent their nights flying about and traveling as far as the big city of Lublin. Zirzur and Grililda amused themselves by telling each other stories. When day came, the crickets rested in the nest they had dug, and the imps slept in their tree hollow. Little by little, the nights began to get cool. The mist rose from the river. The frogs croaked less frequently. One seldom heard the whirring of crickets. Zitzor and Grilda kept close together for warmth. Sometimes it rained, lightened, and thundered at night. Paziz and Paziza did not suffer from the cold, but they too had their troubles. First, they felt sorry for their friends, the crickets. Second, the tree in which they lived stood not far from the synagogue, and every day they were disturbed by the blowing of the ram's horn. It is known that imps are afraid of the sound of the ram's horn. When Paziza heard the horn's blast, she began to tremble and cry. One evening, Paziza noticed that the chimney leading to the stove behind which she and Zitzor used to live had smoke coming out of it. It had been rebuilt and was again in use. All four friends took counsel and decided to try to get behind the stove for the winter. Paziz and Paziza would have no difficulty getting in there. They could fly into the house through an open window or through the chimney when the stove was cold. But for Zitzor and Grilda, it would be a long and difficult journey. However, with the imps helping the crickets along, they all made their way to the old space between the stove and the wall. The days became shorter, the nights longer. Outdoors it rained and snowed. The frost came, but behind the stove it was dark, warm, and smelled of bread, cakes, and Sabbath pudding. The owners often toasted noodles and baked apples. In the kitchen, the housewife and her daughters plucked chickens and told stories about ghosts, hobgoblins, and imps. After having spent so much time listening to the people of the house, Paziza and Zitzor had learned to understand the language of humans. They had long since discovered that, like crickets and imps, humans too dream of love and happiness. Zitzor and Grilda never again left their nest, but Paziz and Paziza would often go out to the chimney to air their wings and revel in adventures of the netherworld. Each time they returned, they brought back new stories for the stay-at-homes. Some were gay and mischievous, others devilish and frightening, but all delighted the crickets and gave Zitzor much to chirp about with Grilda in the long winter nights. And that is the end of our story, and that is where we are going to stop for this evening. Next week we'll tell the story of Naphtali, the storyteller, and his horse Sus. It's a wonderful story. I love this story so much. You'll have to be here next week for this story. It is not to be missed. Okay, so don't forget, tomorrow night is Rabbi A and Rabbi Ansel, and they are going to be discussing something. I'm not sure what it is, but they are going to be discussing something. And then on Wednesday night is the Torah study in depth with Rabbi A. And don't forget, God willing, that Friday night is Kabbalat and Ma'ariv, the Shabbat service. And on Shabbat at 10 p.m. Eastern is Shachrit and Musaf. We start the Sefer Shemot this week. Okay, so, my friends, until the next time, we are simply going to say, Laila Tov.
Let's all go to the